And then I need to send you guys all the YouTube link.
Yeah. Send it on chat and I'll tweet it now.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Share. Copy.
Yeah, I'm seeing it already. Yeah. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, and then share screen. Share. Okay, so now you should all just see, if you go to the YouTube channel I just shared, you should see the page. And I'm going to mute everyone. We'll come back in 10 minutes at 5 o'clock.
Right now, the YouTube shows our faces, not the
Yeah,
screen.
it has about 20 seconds delay, so hopefully
okay.
it will work. Yeah. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. I think we're
Hi.
on. I'm just
Can
gonna
you
stop
see?
sharing. I'm gonna
Can
stop
you see
sharing my
me?
screen. Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can see you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay. So hello to everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to Barcelona, which is where I am, Orlando, which is where Carolina Cruz Neira is, and London, where Sylvia Pan is. Carolina Cruz Neira is going to speak today on virtual reality as the new innovation engine as part of this Frontiers Editors series. So Carolina is a virtual reality pioneer who in the early 1990s, while at University of Illinois in Chicago, invented the CAVE virtual reality system. She obtained a PhD in 1995. She was then the Stanley Chair Professor in Interdisciplinary Engineering and a co-founder of the Virtual Reality Application Center at Iowa State University. In 2002, she co-founded there and co-directed the Human-Computer Interaction Graduate Program. She's also held significant roles at the University of Louisiana Lafayette and also at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And she's been heavily involved in industrial applications of virtual reality. In 2009, just in time to meet the coronavirus, she joined the University of Central Florida as a Aguirre Chair Professor in Computer Science Department, has moved to Orlando just in time for these momentous events that we're all involved in. She is the Chief Editor of Frontiers in Virtual Reality in the section which is called Virtual Reality in Industry. She's played a very big role, maybe not unknowingly, in my own career. We were using in the 1990s head-mounted displays a lot. No, they weren't going anywhere. I understand that during that time, everybody said virtual reality was dead, but nobody told me, so we just carried on. And the only way we could actually carry on, this was at University College London, is to buy a cave-like device, which has supported our research, for 20 years and is still not obviously exactly the same one, but is still very much in use now at UCL. Today, I'd also like to thank Domina Banacao and Gizam Senel in Barcelona, who are helping behind the scenes, and Professor Dirk Reiners of University of Central Florida in Orlando, who's helping in Orlando. I'd also, of course, like to thank very much Sylvia Pan, who has expertly organized the Zoom and the YouTube to make all of this possible. So now I'm handing over to Carolina, and she'll talk for 45, 50 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mel. And same as Mel said, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody out there. So let me share my screen so we can all hopefully look at the same thing together.
Carolina, can I just remind you, if you have sound or video, you need to tick the box when you share the screen.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
See, if this works, there we go. So, so I want to talk a little bit about virtual reality as the new innovation engine, because as Mel said many years ago, I was told that virtual reality was dead, and same as Mel, I guess I didn't listen at the time. And today I'm starting to hear some rumors that virtual reality is also not promising, not delivering what it promised. And I think it is. It's just we hear perhaps too much on the popular channels and not so much from the experts. So today I'm going to chat a little bit about that. So first of all, I want to share my impressions when I looked at virtual reality for first time. And in my case, that first time was 1991. So that was almost 30 years ago, 29 years ago to be exact. So my observations at that time was that VR was a one-person system. And in the majority of the experiences, I was alone in the virtual space, which unfortunately it still happens today. We do have some shared spaces and some collaborative spaces, but when we talk about the real, let's say, productive or effective spaces, are still very lonely places. Another observation that I had in 1991 is that when I went into VR, I was not myself anymore. And that has good and bad situations. In my personal experience, it gets confusing because, like you see in this picture, suddenly I see hands, but those hands are not my hands. I see bodies, but those bodies are not my bodies. And in situations where I'm trying to be productive and efficient through trying to be innovative, sometimes that can be a barrier to be successful. Another thing that I also noticed in 1991 is that when I was in virtual spaces, nobody else around me knew where I was, because everybody else, like in this image, were grounded in the real space while I was in some amazing space, and it was very hard for me to share and communicate what I was experiencing. At the same time, I didn't know where I was, because I was in, again, a virtual space, but I was aware on the back of my mind that I was in some space that had objects that I could bump into, people that might be looking at me, and I might be doing motions or gestures or something that it might really feel very weird outside the context of my virtual experience, and that to some extent might inhibit my sort of freedom of do whatever I wanted to do in the virtual space. Me personally, I think that we are social animals, so it's very hard for me to envision this kind of group scenario where everybody has a set and we sort of all meet in virtual space, but we leave ourselves behind. And again, not in all situations, this is not a black and white situation, but there are many environments and contexts where we need to be ourselves, not an image of ourselves in our virtual spaces. And of course, there are, my observations were also that depending on the kind of people that I was observing, testing the systems, there would be some impacts like motion sickness, of course. People just plain and simple were very uncomfortable, disoriented, and so on. So that was 1991. And if we really think about it, a lot of these observations, unfortunately, are still valid today. So we still are facing these issues as we continue advancing virtual reality. Now, another sort of existential question for me is trying to figure out what is VR, because there is always, especially today, there is conversations about VR, AR, augmented reality, XR, mixed reality, and many other ones. So people approach me all the time and ask me this question: what is VR? Well, for me, VR is basically everything, because people define VR as when you are totally immersed in completely computer-generated environments or entirely digital worlds. They will define AR as digital worlds that enhance reality. Now, for me, these two are not different, because really what we are trying to do is create a digital reality that is going to serve whatever situation, whatever environment we are in, to do whatever task or whatever work or whatever mission we need to do at that particular moment, and it gives us the expected engagement that we need. So for me, there is not really any difference between all these terms, AR, VR, XR, all those things. To me, it's really the experience that we're trying to convey the user. And through the rest of my talk, I'm gonna mostly use VR as the term, but I want all of you, as you listen to my conversation, that is not VR on the strict definition that we find on the textbook, but is this continuum space that is just delivering an experience to a user that enables that user to accomplish whatever the user needs to accomplish, whether it is work, whether it's relaxation, whether it is training, whether it's medical therapy. It's that space that is assisted through different levels of immersion and engagement that allow us to provide those users what they need. So in that context, this is one of my classical slides that I always show to everybody. You know, let's just be very, very clear. When we talk about VR and AR, people immediately think some kind of headset, some kind of goggles, something that you put on your face. Please, let's remove that thought from our minds and be a lot more open-minded, because really what we're looking at technologies just that take us to that place, to that environment, that's where we want to be functional and where we want to do whatever it is we want to do. So there might be technologies out there that we haven't even invented or discovered yet. And I really want all of us to keep a much open mind, because that's when we are going to be innovative and that's when we're going to be creative. So in my case, going back to this 1991 situation, when I look at all these technologies at that time, with those kinds of thoughts that I just shared with you, my immediate thought was, well, I need to come out with some kind of technology that give us a more social or more human VR space where we can be truly innovative, because innovation rarely comes as an individual. Innovation comes through a group of people that share ideas, discuss solutions. Maybe somebody tells you something, and when you hear that, it triggers something else. So allow that kind of all being together in the same space as we, not as a digital version of ourselves, but like me, myself, I want to be there and I want you to be there with me. And I want to see your body language. I want to see your face expressions. I want to have a conversation inside the virtual space. So at that time, let's see if the video plays. Together with my advisors at the Electronic Visualization Lab at the University of Illinois in Chicago, we came out with the concept of the cave. So Experience VR, just for dates, Experience VR at the end of July of 1991. And the first cave was up and running approximately in November, December of 1991. And it was shown to the public during a private event in Chicago in May of 1992, and then officially disclosed to the public during SIGGRAPH 1992, also in Chicago. But as you can see in the video, it's a very social space where everybody shares the virtual environment. There is a conversation. So you see here, this is a real project that we did a few years ago for a zoo in Oklahoma. So you have the architect and the designer of the zoo are presenting the concept to some of the zoo members, and they are discussing issues like safety as visitors come. You know, there is a big tree in there that might be, for example, a tripping hazard. Some other groups are more concerned about the enclosures for the animals, how big or how small the areas for the public to really walk around and enjoy and have a good experience. And as you can see, it's a very easy in and out and a very just, I don't want to use the word natural, but a very sort of the same way that you will have a conversation in the real world, you can have this kind of conversations and discussions. Everybody has the same focus of attention because, as you can see, people can point on something and you see those fingers pointing at something. They're looking at each other's faces and they are just really having a very engaging conversation as if they were really in that location. So this was started in 1992. And then one of the things that happened after that, between 1997 and, you know, like even today, but more importantly, what I would call the obscure years of virtual reality, 1997 to about 2010 or 2011, you know, when everybody thought that VR was dead, VR was not dead, because all these images that you see here are different groups around the world in that period, 1997 to 2011, using the cave for innovation. So you can see people in the oil and gas industry, people in different engineering related industries, people in healthcare and pharmacology industries. You can see tourism people. You can see retailers doing shopper experiences, and many, many other sports. And all this was happening outside the press. So it was a very active community exploring virtual reality and innovating through virtual reality and changing the way we do businesses through virtual reality, but it was not publicized because for whatever reason, it became a matter of fact. So it was no longer news. It was no longer, for some reason, excited, but a lot of innovations happened during this time. I mean, there were many of these engineering companies that for example, reduced their product development cycle from like 8-9 years to down to 2-3 years because of the ability to have a lot of discussions in virtual spaces. There were companies that were able to bring products to market much faster because they were able to get a lot of customer feedback through this kind of environment. So there was a lot of innovation happening. We see a lot of products today. You know, I like to say many people when they talk to me that I think almost every single brand of car that is being driven today in the world, at any time in the process of developing that car, there is a cave somewhere in there. So maybe a particular company uses the cave for concept evaluation. Some other companies might use cave for engineering design. Some other companies use the cave for customer evaluation and feedback on the new models and many other areas. So VR never was really dead. It's for whatever reason, it just was not, for the lack of a better word, sexy to the press for some reason. But then we have 2012 and the Oculus, and that changed the world again, because now I think today it's almost impossible to get any kind of technical magazine without seeing any kind of reference to VR or AR all over the world. These are just some example of magazines, but it's pretty much back on the public eye. And one more time, as it happened in the late 90s, I think there is a little bit perhaps of too much excitement, and there is perhaps that excitement is putting public words on our mouths that is not really the way we meant it, because obviously it's a technology that is still under development. There is a lot of things that we're still learning about it. It's going to help us to be very innovative. It is helping us today to be very innovative, but it's not a very mature technology yet. However, it's being presented sometimes in the public as a mature technology, and that of course contradicts expectations to the reality of what's available and what's being delivered out there. So as we look at VR today, these are some examples. So, and these are all products that we all know, like the HoloLenses and the HTC Vives and the Magic Leaps and all those, you know, so this is what it looks like. So if we look at the future, this is what's coming. So these are some prototypes of the future, right? So some of you a little older might be laughing at this moment. Why? Because look at this. So we got 30 years in between the top level pictures and the low level pictures. What's the difference in here? because this is what the public sees. There's no difference. So what have we done in 30 years? It's exactly the same. It's portrayed in the same way. So to me, this is very frustrating because, again, there is a lot happening. There is a lot of innovation. There is a lot of very unique uses. There is been a lot of lessons learned in these 30 years, but it looks like VR just started 5 years ago. And that, to me, is dangerous because then we start having, we are back to 1985 in my mind, because this is the vision of VR for the future. And I don't necessarily say that this is wrong. I just think this is a very narrow vision that is leaving a fundamental component of what makes us human out of the future. And I think that we really cannot do that because we are not this kind of animal. We are this kind of animal. We are a social animal. We like to work together. We like to discuss. We like to help each other. We like to show. We like to teach. We like to learn. We like to be in a group. We like to be social. So when we look at VR, we don't have to forget about what makes us human and incorporate that into our concept of VR for the future. So for me, when I look at VR and I look at innovation, that to me is critical because first of all, I see that there is a tremendous amount of work that myself, Mel Slater, and many others that you will be hearing in this seminar series, we have done, for the last 30 years that either seems to me that it is unknown or is being ignored. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean this in an educational way, in a motivational way, because we've done a lot of work. We had a lot of lessons learned. We have done many things wrong, and we have done, hopefully, some things right. So, but I don't see a lot of those lessons learned incorporated in today's virtual reality. And that to me is worrisome because we're, in a sense, we're wasting time because we are going certain paths that we have been there before. Granted, the technology today is much robust, is much simpler, is of course much more affordable, but the concepts of what we're trying to do are similar or equivalent to what we were doing on the early days, and there is very little transfer from that work to today's work, and that to me is worrisome. I also noticed that, and it's changing, but I noticed that a lot of the current VR markets are not really seriously or committed to look at the needs of team efforts. A lot of the headset systems don't really address very well the social interaction and teamwork that is needed to be in an industrial setting. And that again goes back to the main theme of my conversation. Another thing that I feel sometimes that is not being considered is that for many settings, for many environments, we need platforms that are simple to get in and out to enable those discussions. And something that can be just a casual, let me grab this and walk in there and see something. Focus of attention and controlling that focus of attention is critical because I cannot, in a sense, mention or say how many times I've been in virtual experiences where the person or the people in charge of that experience lose control of what I'm doing in VR because I am on my own and I'm like, they're like, no, you have to look around and you'll see something, and that's what you have to pay attention to, and my head is just going all over the place and they're like, do you see the red something? And I'm like looking at some tree because that to me is more interesting. I'm kind of ignoring them telling me, look at the red tree. So that's a big issue again, to be able to be productive and to be effective. Another area that I think is not being paid attention, and a very simple example of this is when we talk about VR and education, which now, of course, with the COVID situation becomes even more relevant, is the cost of operation and the effort to maintain those VR equipment and system. Imagine a fourth grade teacher that has 25 little kids in her class. If that teacher has to take care of 25 headsets and have those 25 kids get into their 25 headsets all at the same time, making sure they are all in the right application, making sure they are all looking and paying attention at the same part of the lesson, I personally see that a very high complex environment for that teacher and a tremendous source of stress that most likely might lead into rejection of the technology. Because again, it's not an in and out, it's not simple, has a lot of potential places where things can break, out of control, not sure who's what is supposed to be and all that. So to me, those are things that as I go around consulting and working with different groups, this kind of conversation almost comes as a surprise in many circles that I move in. And then of course we also have the issues of we still don't know very much about what happens when we have people inside VR for long extended periods of time. So this is an area that is active research and very good results are being produced, but there is still a lot of data missing in there, and especially when we look at different age groups in these kinds of situations. So to me, these are issues that we need to address, we are addressing, but I think we need to be perhaps more aggressive addressing these issues if we want VR to be successful and really stay for good in what I call the second wave of VR. There's a lot of untapped opportunities. I think there's a lot of opportunities for both business ventures as well as research opportunities. I always tell my PhD students, lots of PhD theses in this slide, tremendous amount of opportunities there. So on my side, what I've been doing in the most recent years, and I hope to increase this work here at the University of Central Florida, is first of all, I'm still very focused on social interaction and teamwork. So here is an example using AR HoloLens technology on trying to really see how we can work as a team and how we can be productive in the simplest, easiest possible way. Doesn't necessarily have to be caves. That's a little disclaimer. A lot of people think that I'm very partial to caves. I'm not. It's a technology, of course, I developed, but it was developed for a reason. And there are many wonderful technologies out there that serve the same purpose. So right now we are very platform agnostic as far as VR and AR. And we are just interested on how we can be teams in VR and utilize what we utilize in, let's say, the normal or real world as cues to be effective teams and transfer that into the virtual and augmented space. Another area that I'm very interested on, and we want to work again a lot more here in Orlando, is understanding the context of use for the different people that might be part of a task or they might be part of a group, and what kind of VR or AR makes sense, because I am a believer that a single platform for VR doesn't fit all. So we might all be in the same virtual experience, but depending on our roles, we might need a different platform to be effective. So based on that, you know, most of my work continues being serving industry and trying to help through my research how we can help industry to use this technology in an effective manner. So here is a short video of a lot of third grade kids, and this is our most recent incarnation of a cave system. We call it the VDEN. It's a very, very low cost. It's a consumer level product. So you can see the kids are having an anatomy lesson. They are all engaged. They are kind of following the teacher, the focus of attention and all that. And as you can see, it's very similar to a classroom experience where the teacher has a very clear view of all of them. It can say, hey, Mikey, pay attention. You're not looking. Like you can see here, this is Wyatt actually turning around so the teacher can call him to attention and go back. So this is something that to me excites me quite a lot, and I hope to continue this kind of work. And of course, the challenge now is more the content. How do we develop that content so people don't depend from people like us to develop these experiences? So that's really our challenge. So here is just a little bit of where all our 20 years of experience have been culminating in this particular system. So we make a very simple original case where a cluster of workstations, you need to be a PhD in computer science to develop an application. So this is just a single workstation, has an SDK that is compatible with the typical SDKs like Oculus Rift or SteamVR and all that, fits in Unity, Unreal, and so on. It limits your footprint, so it's easy to set up. And more importantly, because from many years of experience, you know, people don't come to see your VR. Your VR has to go to people. So it's very easy, of course, to take a headset with you. So now we also made it easy to take a cave with you. But that also has opened the door to what I call context-driven collaborative environments. And this is really where I see innovation really happening, because here is an example where the same application uses different VR and AR platforms depending on who's using it. So on the left, we have, well, this is a military scenario. So on the left, you will have, for example, the on the ground or on the field commanders. So they have a very simple tablet-based AR where they have an overview of the entire theater. So they can see the terrain, they can see what their forces are, they can see what any problems can be. In the middle, you have the dismounted soldier. So for this particular group of users, headsets work very, very well because they give them a full sense of immersion. We couple them with treadmills, so they also have the physical exertion of walking that terrain and being alert for the things that might happen. On the lower right is a concept for potentially drone pilots to have a bird's eye of the space and being able to maneuver those drones to the right locations. And on the top right, we use a cave for the very high level commanders kind of situation room, time of space, where they really need to be have a much broader understanding of what's happening. So this is all the same application, but it is presented differently. And we're working in other disciplines where this is starting to bring a lot of interesting results and again, a lot of recent innovations by having a much better way to communicate, a much better and a much easier in and out for some of these user groups. So as I say earlier, my current approach is literally to be VR, AR platform agnostic. So my lab in Arkansas, which I left behind just a few months ago, was very diverse. These are pictures from the Emerging Analytics Center, which I founded and led for 6 years. And again, here in the University of Central Florida, together with my husband, Dirk Reiners, we hope to start as soon as COVID allow us all to go back to whatever new normal we go back to create a lab that has this kind of diversity so we can really understand how, when, for whom, and in which manner VR and AR can be helpful and can be a tool for doing good, for innovation, for advancement. It's really what is really made me go to the office every day, even though my office is my home these days. Real quick, these are some projects over the years that shows innovation. Sorry, 1 second here. You know, distraction there when you're home. Child photobombing. so this is a project from our times in Louisiana where we were doing virtual welding. So in this case, you can see it's a very simple platform. It's just some monitors with a tracker. We didn't use any of the existing technologies. We analyzed what was at that time available in the market, and we realized that it was probably a lot more cost effective to do this kind of concept approach to the task of training welders, and it worked out really well. And it was in the process of being commercially deployed, a little cleaner than these pictures, when as always, some political hiccups occur and didn't happen. But here is another example that we all are very familiar with, which is using augmented reality for assembling and disassembling or training mechanics. There is many environments where, especially now, younger technicians are facing older technologies that are rolling into their shops and they have to be fixed. And the people with experience are no longer there because most likely they retire. So through AR and VR, we can capture that knowledge, that expertise, and then provide that to the younger technicians and help them work on the different kinds of systems that they might have to work. In this case, a little plastic toy. This is another example that was a very exciting project from my time in Louisiana. It was supported by the National Science Foundation, and this was a wide range of platforms to educate civil engineering students on how to get training for field trips. One piece of information that I was not aware at the time is civil engineers, especially the ones that specialize on things related to environmental aspects, during their careers, they do a lot of field trips, but it's very difficult during their times in the university to give them field trip experience. So many of the companies that hire civil engineers have to invest as much as 2 years post-graduation to train them on field trip techniques and data gathering and many things like that. So we developed a virtual reality environment where at the simplest level, as you can see on the left picture, it was a traditional desktop space where students could understand a lot of the details of the terrain, a lot of the details of the data they were going to be gathering. They could practice certain exercises, but then they will go, as you see on the right-hand side, they will go into a more immersive space as a team, when then they could share their individual assessment and their individual plan for the field trip. So this actually showed that the students that graduated with this kind of training, they were much more ready to go to field trips than those that were not receiving this kind of training. So I think it opened a very interesting area of being more effective using VR, and some of my colleagues have continued that back in Louisiana. This is a very simple space. We started working with doctors in Arkansas. And even though there are quite a number of anatomy trainers out there, most of the doctors that we talked to, they mentioned to us that they were more targeted to train to perform surgical procedures than to really teach anatomy. So we look at the market of the different platforms out there, and we didn't find anything that was, in a sense, cost effective. So we developed this, as you can see, it's very simple. It's two 4K stereo monitors arranged like a table. It gives us a 1:1 scale of the body, and then allows the doctors to do fairly similar procedures as they would do in an anatomical lab, where they can peel layers of the body. And as you can see, as they're peeling those, they are giving them the medical information of that. And this was very successful, and might or might not go commercial at this time. But the important part here was this was very simple. It's a very simple system. It's very inexpensive. And for the purpose of educating about anatomy, it serves the purpose without needing to be any more complicated or any more, I guess, expensive or something like that. And it's been in use in different medical settings. So that's potentially something we might continue here at UCF. Here's another example of a group of engineers looking at a warehouse and how to arrange the different conveyor systems to move packages between the storage locations to the cargo locations. Unfortunately, when this video was shot, the students were having fun and there are boxes falling off the conveyors and doing some other things. But so this is actually a project that we have done in collaboration with a company called Hytrol, and it's located in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And in the last 2 years, we moved this to the original concept, but we developed this to be an effective space, to the point that they're actually having this now in their facilities. So they have one of these vision systems, and the engineers are using these type of environments now to develop much more complicated and larger conveyor systems to demonstrate their customers how these systems can help to maintain the warehouse packages and materials in a perhaps more efficient manner. We've done some work with treadmills, because one of the aspects of VR that needs to be also taken into account for certain environments is the fact that you have to get physically tired, because trying to do certain things just in a chair, only visual, at the end of the day, it might not give you the full training or the full experience or the ability to do what you need to do. So we started a few years back with a very complicated treadmill, the one on the top left. And most recently, we've been using the game-oriented treadmills for that. And we do notice, of course, a very noticeable difference on the mental performance of some of our projects and users in those projects, if they are on the treadmill or not. So that's another, I wanted to bring that up on my talk today, because it's something, again, that we should keep in mind. When we do many of the activities that we do in real life, part of our ability to do those is also related to our physical exertion. So sometimes we might feel that we're very productive in VR because we're not moving our physical body. And if we want to, again, use it for training in particularly, this is a factor that needs to be taken into account. So to wrap up, lessons learned in these 30 years of being in VR since I was a young, naive little PhD student that didn't even speak English to today. So first of all, we need to know what we're talking about if we want to be innovative. So for all of you today that are from the younger generation that are listening to my talk, please do your homework. Understand what you want to do, your options. Understand what people like me and others that have been around for a long time have done, what we did successfully, what we didn't do very successfully, but really understand that. I cannot tell you how many young people come to me like, oh, I have this wonderful idea, you know, and I just have to hold back myself a little bit because I don't want to crush their hearts. But a lot of these wonderful ideas is like, there's like 30 examples from 1997 to 2010 that idea was already done. And in some cases, it was a successful idea. In some cases, it was not. But the point is, it might still be a good idea today because maybe something that we tried to do many years ago, we couldn't do it because of the technology. We can do it today. Maybe we can do it today, but your idea is going to be even more innovative if you understand why it didn't work 10 years ago, why it didn't work even 20 years ago, because then you can take it really to a really next level and really, really do something innovative and something that might change the world. Another thing that to me is a really big issue is we need to understand where virtual reality fits, how it fits, and in which form fits. One size does not fit all in VR. It doesn't. So we have to stop as VR practitioners to fit the application to the device that we have in our company or the device that we have in our labs. We need to understand what we're trying to accomplish, who are the users that we're trying to help, and really be honest on whether or not the resources that we have access to can be of help. Because again, there's been many failures, and in the recent years, I see many failures because we're trying to feed the application to the hardware that we have. And we really need to change that completely around. We need to understand that application, and then we have to decide which hardware we need to implement that application. We also need to keep in mind that we should not take away our ability to socially interact with others when we are in virtual reality and when it's really needed, and which form of social interaction is needed. You know, through COVID, we all have learned a lot about being online. I see my child, he is like a fish in the water, happy, happy, happy all the time, interacting through some of the video games where they don't even see each other. They just hear each other, but they kind of play through avatars and all that. In that situation, his level of social interaction, even though he is not he, and his friends are not his friends, there are some characters in this magical world, it works very well. So that's okay, that's fine. But there are some other situations that perhaps are more work-oriented situations where if I'm a salesperson and I'm trying to sell my product to a customer through virtual reality, I need to be able to see that customer's body language. I need to be able to see that face expression. If I'm an educator and I have my class in VR, same thing, I need to be able to see my students somehow and see if they are following my class or not following my class. So that to me is a very critical issue. And that relates, of course, to what I already talked about, the focus of attention and the leader control of where the different people are paying attention in the virtual environment. That is also critical for success and innovation. And the one that is a biggie is custom solutions. So still today, 2020, we are still developing the majority of the VR applications as unique custom solutions that are very difficult to extrapolate to a different discipline. And this is really what is limiting our ability to really deploy this technology big and to really have a huge impact in the world. And that's a big challenge. And all of you like me out there that do software systems for VR, we all know that this is a huge challenge, but we need to go for it. We cannot give up, because until this is solved, we are all still going to be limping on one leg with one arm tied behind our backs. So, and then finally, please never forget that when we do all this, at the end of the day, we're putting a piece of technology in our users. So there are things that we need to understand as engineers, which is the operation of the system that we are giving that user, maintenance, even the financial aspects of not only the acquisition of the system, but to keep the system running. Once you finish your job and you walk away and you leave your customer with that piece of equipment, how are they going to be able to continue operating and financing and maintaining that if you are not around anymore? And this tends to be forgotten quite often. So just to finish, so this is my looking forward in the next 5 years. I think we are all going to have a great future. There's going to be a lot of exciting platforms. There's going to be a lot of creative solutions. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting new innovative things, products, applications, ideas that are going to be enabled by the technology that we all love so much. But my closing thought is, please always keep a very wide open mind on what is the concept of VR and the technology implementation of VR. Let's think on the concept and how we can all implement that concept in the widest possible way so we keep growing the field. There's my email if anybody wants to contact me, and I'm going to pass it to Mel in case there are any questions for me.
Hello?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Thanks very much for a very interesting and also illuminating talk. I'm sure if everyone could clap, we would all be clapping now. So as far as questions go, people who are on the Zoom, you can put your questions on the chat or on the Q&A, preferably on the chat. And those of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, you can type your questions as comments and they'll be fed to me through the chat. And also Carolina can also, I'll feed the questions, but also Carolina may read them as well. So the first question I've seen was on Q&A, and it's from Pierre Giorgio. And he says, good afternoon. I'd like to know if it could be possible to simulate a neurosurgical procedure in a virtual environment, if it could be a possibility to create a virtual operating room. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, well, this is a very good question. So thank you for asking that. If you notice in my talk, I didn't mention anything about the sense of touch or the sense of forces in VR. And this is a question that always comes up, especially when we talk about surgical simulators. At this moment, I would be reluctant to answer you, oh yes, we can do this, no problem at all. Because through my many years of working with doctors, I know medical procedures have quite a lot of very precise steps and very precise motions. And in many cases, there are other sensors beyond seeing and hearing that help surgeons to understand what's happening in the surgery. At this moment, the sense of touch for VR and AR is perhaps the least practically developed technology. So there is a lot of experimental systems out there, but unless Mel or anybody else out there that is hearing me can tell me something I'm not aware of, I don't think we have developed anything in the haptic world that is at this moment really usable on these kinds of applications in a production environment. They are usable in a research environment when we are still learning about what's important and what's not important, but it's not something that I think is ready to be deployed. Also, some other surgeons, friends of mine, have made comments to me that in certain kinds of surgeries, it's also very important to train the young surgeons to even capture the smell. And again, I know very little about this, but if a smell is a component that a surgeon needs to be trained to recognize, that's again something that we are a little behind in having those kinds of technologies in the VR world. So yes, my answer to you is yes and no. We can have some form or neurological surgical simulator, but it will have to be carefully designed to make sure that VR addresses the training pieces that VR is able to deliver.
Thanks very much. So there is a question from Ronan Bulik, who's actually one of the associate editors of the Frontiers in Virtual Reality. He asks, what do you recommend in terms of head tracking in a case by multiple users? A master user for whom the display is updated, a fixed viewpoint, no head tracking, or another approach?
Yeah, that's another very good question, Ronan. And that's, as you know, an ongoing area of research. And that's something that at this moment, Dirk Reiners and myself, and he's the PI, we have a National Science Foundation grant to one more time look again with today's technology at multi-user cave type of environments. So there's been some progress in the technology. So right now there are some commercial products, projectors that allow refresh rates fast enough that you can have between 2 and 4 independent projected views. So that will give you between 2 and 4 viewers, independent viewers in a cave. There are also some other techniques that we are trying to evaluate, which I call timeshare in a cave. So as far as recommending any particular specific product or brand, I cannot do that at this moment because I am a faculty member at the University of Central Florida, and therefore I'm a state of Florida employee, so I cannot endorse any particular vendor. So, especially on a public forum like this one, but I would say the ones that we all know. There are different kinds of tracking out there that work very well, and the usual suspects that we all know so far in our experience work very well.
Thanks very much. And I think you've also answered the question that was put, a rider question that was asked by Mustafa Akavi. So the next question, I'm not sure if it's from Domna Banakal herself or she's passed on from someone else. She says, thanks, Caroline, a great talk. What do you foresee as being the next big technological innovation in immersive technology in the next 10 years?
Yeah, well, hey, that's always a hard question. To me personally, I think that we will see more innovation through AR than through solely VR. That's my personal intuition at this moment. Because when we talk about AR, we are still, again, maintaining the social element, the social interaction element. We are also grounding ourselves where our body is grounded. So our virtual space and our real space, in a sense, is integrated. So I think that's where we might see the biggest innovation. We will see any breakthrough like you know, when Jaron Lanier did the iPhone in the 80s, or when I did the cave in the 90s, or some other things like that. I don't know, because, you know, through many years as I started as a computer graphics person before I went into VR. And I have to tell you that as in my times as a PhD student, I saw a tremendous amount of groundbreaking innovations in computer graphics, but realistically in the last, I would say 10, 15 years, it has been more of a refinement progression. I mean, obviously the field is advancing, but to some extent, or maybe I'm very spoiled, I haven't seen anything that says like, wow, this is really cool. Like I remember, for example, the first time that we animated water in computer graphics, I was like, oh my God, I can see an ocean, I can see waves, you know. The first time that we saw tree growing in computer graphics, we were all like, oh my God, we can do, you know, time progression on trees and evolutionary computing. You know, now it feels to me that it has sort of more mature technology, that it now is getting, of course, better, it's refining, people are doing fantastic job, but it's more building on those foundations, on those breakthroughs that happen. And I think in VR, we are starting to reach that point. You know, we explore headsets, we explore spaces, whether they are projected or whatever, you know, we are exploring mobile devices. So it's hard for me to imagine there is any other something that we haven't tapped into that would be that kind of completely groundbreaking and wowing us. But I would bet it would see innovation in AR, because there is a lot of room to improve AR still today.
Thanks. There's a question from Laura Kotulski. Curious to know what your thoughts are on marketing in the virtual reality world. Is anyone doing it well? Who's doing it the most? Do you think there is enough advertising?
Yes, I think actually marketing is perhaps one of the most prolific areas using VR and AR, and perhaps one of the shorter term areas that will benefit for this technology. You have my email. I can talk to you, Laura, more privately. You want to know more details, but you know, there is a lot of AR marketing. I mean, there are many magazines that if you open the magazine and you look at it through your cell phone or your tablet, there are really exciting things that pop out of the magazine pages. You know, there are companies that they have their products, and you can actually see their products in your own home or functioning. There are events that they get marketed through VR and AR. So I think the world of marketing is perhaps one of the ones that is evolving faster and taking advantage of this technology faster.
Thanks. Kyle Hooks asks, someone wants to develop a new socially focused VR platform while keeping the success and failures of the last 30 years in mind. What would you say is the biggest hurdle to address in the process?
Well, first of all, Kyle is one of my former students and I love him to death. So Kyle, good question. So I don't know, like I always told you when you were in my lab, that is for all of you to think. You are the next generation of thinkers, the next generation of innovators. So learn from me, learn from Dr. Slater, learn from many other people like us, and knock our socks out. That's for you to answer that question, not for me.
Great. I know you have a time limitation, so I think there'll be 2 more questions, if that's okay. Sure. There's one from Aitor Rovira, who I think you know.
I know Aitor. Oh my God, Hola. All my old-time students. Yes.
Hola, Carolina. Thank you for the interesting talk. What do current applications miss for being groundbreaking?
Well, I think many environments can be groundbreaking today. I'll give you an example from my time in Arkansas, and all my colleagues from Arkansas that might be hearing will remember this, which is still an active project. Pest control. how do you think that VR can help on pest control? Is that a groundbreaking application? I think it is. Why? Well, I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of the people hearing me here today don't know that the person that comes to our home to fumigate every month or every 3 months to make sure that we don't have ants in our house or roaches, that person has received a fairly expensive training to get the license to have the chemicals to come home and actually fumigate our home. So that industry, it prevents many people from being able to get that job. That again sounds one of those background jobs that sometimes we don't even notice on our busy days. And many people are unable to pay the cost of the training, because that usually means they have to spend between $6,000 to $10,000 US traveling to some training facility, which is usually a prison kitchen or a very large school kitchen or something like that, where they have to know all the different pests, the habits that those pests have, so they know where to find them, what kind of chemicals will address those and are safe for the people, and many other details, a lot of those details. Well, VR can reduce that to probably $100, because we can create a virtual environment that has even bigger selection of bad cases, and then there will be a lot more people that can be into that business. So I think a lot of this breakout and again, innovation and never heard before, they're coming from daily life that we're not even thinking about it, because a lot of us, in a sense, we don't know these things until people come to us and say, this is my problem. And that's what we do as engineers. We solve problems. But somebody has to tell us what those problems are. And they come from the most unexpected places that sometimes we are like, really? Really? We don't know about that. But then we get all excited about it, you know. And if Jay is out there listening, Jay Sack, one of my wonderful people from Arkansas, he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Thanks. Have you got time for one more?
Yeah.
Okay, there's actually two questions, but I'm going to roll them into one question. The general question is, what were you expecting from early years of VR that hasn't come yet? And as an example, would you think that the current tech on finger and hand tracking through cameras is going to be preferable to haptic gloves in the future? So it's like they're kind of two things rolled into one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll just say one is from Luke Verneson and the other one is from Panos Kurtisis.
All right. Well, I think if we look at what has happened in the last 30 years, and we are still today, in a sense, not doing, is, I guess, the second question, which is interaction. Interaction is one of the areas where we are the weakest, I would say, in VR. And as I tell to my students and many people around me, you know, the world changed when the desktop paradigm appeared for the computers. We don't have that in VR. The desktop paradigm for VR, whatever it is, we have not been able to develop that. Now, my personal thinking on that is that we cannot develop that, because when you are in a virtual environment, again, and in the kind of situations that I'm talking about, which are more on the industry-based type of applications, you know, in a sense, is recreating the real world, and the real world doesn't interact in a unified manner. You know, you open doors and you leave things and you manipulate things in the world, and it's very difficult to unify that in a paradigm. So I think that's something that we are still not doing very well. There are a lot of creative ideas out there, but nothing that we can all as a globally adopt that this is the protocol or this is the way to do things. Now, to the second questions about finger tracking and haptics, let's differentiate, because when we talk about haptics, we talk about feeling the world, feeling the weight, feeling the texture, feeling the temperature, and that's very different than finger tracking. So those are two different technologies. So haptics, I already talked about it. I think It's a really exciting technology. It's a very needed technology, but it's a little bit very early in the development stages, even though it's been developed side by side with the visual aspects of VR for the last 30 years or 40 years. So that one is still under very active research. Now, hand tracking, gesture tracking, finger tracking is getting much, much better. But then we go back to the question of interaction. You know, we've been talking for years and years and years about natural interaction in VR. Again, I'm not a believer on natural interaction of VR, except for really straightforward things like reach out your hand and grab an object. That would be a natural interaction in VR. But if we start doing what I call sign language in VR to manipulate VR, then our language of gestures overwhelms us, and then we're not going to be efficient because we're not going to remember what those gestures are. So that's still a big area of research. But technology to capture your fingers, your hands, and all that, I think is getting there, and it's going to be there very, very soon, very available. Versus haptics, I think haptics is a much longer term technology.
Thanks very much. So I want to thank you again for a really excellent, informative talk, and I think everyone would join in giving you applause, but you'll only probably going to hear me. So thanks very much again. Before we close, I'd like to again thank Sylvia Pan, Dr. Sylvia Pan, and I should point out that she's an associate editor of Frontiers in Virtual Reality in the Human Behavior in Virtual Reality section. And again, thank you to the behind the scenes helpers, Domina Banakal, Gizam Senel, Professor Dirk Reiners, and others who I may not know. Now, next Monday, 18th of May at 1500, 3 o'clock Central European Summertime, that's Madrid, Paris, Berlin, Professor Anthony Steed from University College London is going to be talking on the technical challenges of mixed reality. And I hope you're also able to make that talk. So thank you very much. And good morning.
Well, thank you,
night,
everybody.
Whatever.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.